It would have required no planning, just opportunistic reaction, and it would have been an unpredictable event whose downstream influence was out of all proportion to its concrete effect. It would parallel the Treasury's position that money lost or banks failed is a private tragedy of no importance, but that public loss of confidence in the financial system must be avoided. On September 18, 2001, we escaped a public loss of confidence by luck and luck alone. As such, the next time someone tells you that the absence of a major internet attack to date makes the absence of one tomorrow more assured, you can remind them that this proof that we escaped such an attack by dumb luck puts to bed any implication that every day without such an attack makes such an attack less likely. It does not make it less likely, but what it does most assuredly do is make it more surprising when it does come. Note that I'm not conjuring up nation-state actors or divine intervention, though I personally believe that both are at work at all times. What I am suggesting is that change is what evolution is about, and that change is rarely steady, but rather tends to be abrupt, that change is event-driven, that the amount of change an event engenders is proportional to the surprise with which the event arrives, and that we cannot make this otherwise. Our preaching on this topic wastes airtime, and which is worse, the more we say it is coming, the more those who live in the moment have reason to ignore us. Speaking as a person with some training in probability, perhaps the point is that probabilistic events occur eventually. Speaking as a person whose faith is real but irrelevant to you, perhaps the point is that everything that has a beginning has an end. For some time now, I've been promoting the idea of measurement in security, arguing that security is now so essential a concern that we can no longer use adjectives and adverbs, but must instead use numbers. If you have heard me speak on this topic, you will know that, consistent with the view that risk management is about changing the future, not explaining the past, I see no need for metrics beyond their role in decision support. At our present skill in measurement of security, we generally have an ordinal scale at best, not an interval scale and certainly not a ratio scale. In plain terms, this means that we can say whether X is better than Y, but how much better and compared to what is not so easy. Having an ordinal scale is nevertheless well and good, as knowing which is better of two alternatives is what decision-making is precisely about. At the same time, Churchill's admonition that the further back one looks, the further forward one can see, implores us to at least test our predictive ability by imagining that we could use the past to test a mechanism of prediction, since in using the past we can actually calibrate a prediction method by actually knowing what eventually happened. A moment ago I used the word virulence. To a physician, virulence is how badly a bacterium makes you cough and sneeze or worse. But to a bacteriologist, virulence is an innate measure of how good your immune system is at killing that bacterium, since if it can kill it with assurance, to survive that bacterium must cause you to pass it on to the next victim, and to do so quickly enough that your immune system does not cut the skein of its life. Better immune response means greater virulence. We can thus test a little hypothesis of prediction. Working with bacteriologist Trudy Wassenaar, I plotted the date of appearance and the speed of transmission for the big-name computer viruses from 1995 on. What we found was just what an evolutionary model would predict. Virus appearances became surprise and progressively rarer, likely due to progressively competent computer immune systems, but when they did appear, each was much, much more virulent than the one before. In other words, the malware called a virus, while perhaps no longer of much interest, showed the pattern of evolution that you would expect in the natural world, only evolving faster in time than random mutation would predict, and thus confirming the view that sentient opponents only make the clock run faster. Virus attacks have, of course, become rarer over time, which is to say that where infectious agents once ruled, today it is parasites. Parasites have no reason to kill their hosts. On the contrary, they want their host to survive well enough to feed the parasite. A parasite will generally not care to be all that visible either. The difference between parasites and symbiotes can be a close call in some settings, and one of the folks here who famously bragged that he could take the internet down in 20 minutes has also said that a computer is better managed once it is in a botnet than before, since the botmaster will be serious about closing the machine up tight against further penetration, and similarly serious about patch management. Therefore, since one can then say that both the machine's nominal owner and the botmaster are mutually helped, what we have is evolution from parasite to symbiote in action. According to Margulis and Sagan, life did not take over the globe by combat, but by networking. On that basis and others, botnets are a life form. As most of you know, I've argued for some species diversity in those parts of the computing infrastructure that we care to call essential. Stating the obvious, no one calls their part of the infrastructure inessential, so we might as well talk about it all. The word you're waiting for me to say is monoculture, and there I've said it. The diversity of the natural world is something we agree on far more than we disagree. Preserving it as an end is a near universal desire, and like computer security, all the contention is simply around how, not if. But we, laughably unintelligent designers, prefer monocultures, whether it is dryland wheat or corporate desktops. John Evans at the University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee, observes that when a natural hardwood forest is replaced with pulpwood, monoculture, the crop fails in the first rotation because the beetles go from being a native disturbance to a native epidemic. It only gets worse when you increase their food supply. Remember, if you will, that a patch is an advertisement of where the opponent's next meal is coming from, since, as Gerhard Eschelbeck showed, patching behavior is precisely like radioactive decay. In each succeeding interval, half of the then unpatched systems are patched, and in any case, 80% of exploits appear within the first half-life of the patching, of the patch-announced vulnerability, and wreak 85% of their damage in the first fortnight. As there is not a person in this or any room who will argue for explicitly reducing the species diversity of the natural world as if it were a national or international goal, we have to ask why we do it in the synthetic biomes of enterprise computing. Despite what you might think, I am sympathetic, entirely sympathetic to the actual reason we do it. Making everything almost entirely alike is and remains our only hope for being able to manage it on a consistent manner. Put differently, when you deploy a computing monoculture, you're making a risk management decision that the downside risk of a black swan event is more tolerable than the downside risk of perpetual inconsistency. That is rational to a point. In the physical world, the attacker must commit a perfect crime, and the police have all the time in the world to unravel the mystery. In the digital world, the police must craft the perfect defense, and the attacker has all the time in the world to find a single flaw in that defense. That realization leads to and underpins the demand to have consistent, airtight security. That phrase, consistent and airtight, just about has to mean all alike. And all alike is the perfect setting for attacks to come without warning, though if you're lucky, they don't come on your watch. I got into this monoculture versus diversity kick when I was asked to categorically state what sorts of attacks were of a level that legitimately might be called a national security concern. My answer then and now was that only two kinds of attacks were that important. And like the Treasury Department's view of bank failure, that everything else amounted to nothing more than some set of private tragedies. The first kind is some mechanism that, to operate correctly, must be a single point of function